I think that issue with ultimately outsourced manufacturing going on both in the clothing apparel, but probably also in the bats and to some extent of the balls. I mean, I've seen from other sectors like the electronic sector, codes of conduct can be brought together. That what the challenge that manufacturers have found, certainly in that sector, obviously it's not sporting goods, but the challenge that deep into the supply chain, that they receive multiple different questionnaires that they have to then fill in, and that is a real nightmare for manufacturers. So some sort of universal code of conduct, or based on stakeholder collaboration, where there is a common set of questions, would be more efficient from the manufacturer point of view, maybe as well. So, but on that note, thanks very much, Mike. I'll part off over to Andrew, who indeed is very familiar with these sorts of conversations. If you're there, Andrew.
I'm here, yeah. Yeah, thanks very much, Martin. And I'm just going to, listening to all of this, it's been really interesting. I'm going to phrase it in 3 bullet points, one of which you've heard before from me, Martin, and it builds very much, Mark. The first one builds on what you said, Mark. If I was to sort of go, what's the advice for the cricket industry and sustainability? I'd go, 1, collaboration is the new leadership. You know that phrase I've used before. It is, to the point Mark was, the SAC, we have pre-competitive space. There are other spaces like that. One example I want to share is a policy hub. So we have a policy hub that's been set up that FESI, who's a part of the World Federation for Sporting Goods Industry, with the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, is working on sustainable policy, trying to influence the EU Commission on where that's going. Some of the issues that I saw come up today will be influenced by policy, will be influenced on product design. And what the EU is doing will affect other countries. It kind of normally leads the way. And that's a space where there is collaboration on how can we drive ambitious policy that is also realistic. So I'd say collaboration is the new leadership. Second piece, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't create something new. There are tools that are well developed. There was a good piece around the UN guiding principles. That's been built into many programs. There's the OEC due diligence guidance. And I think, look at what's out there. The SAC itself, as the whole purpose of the SAC when it started, its key sort of principle was an aligned set of measurement and tools for the apparel industry, so that the whole industry could work with the same processes, which helps enable that collaboration when it comes to dealing with the issues and dealing with the social and labor issues, but also driving environmental impact. So don't reinvent the wheel, don't create something new, look at what's out there and how can that support the cricket industry. And the third one's an interesting one that came to me this morning is do the boring better and do the exciting faster. And I think listening to the conversation this morning, and the reason I pick up on that is there's going to be a report coming out that's being done by the World Resources Institute and the Apparel Impact Institute coming out in September, which is analysing how do we get to net zero for the apparel industry. And it's coming up and it's done a detailed amount of work using data from the SAC, data from Textile Exchange, looking at where the key areas of intervention are. And it's got 6 areas of key areas to work on. I'm not going to go through them all, but one of them is really around increasing and scaling the use of sustainable materials that exist, preferred materials. So if we switch from polyester to recycled polyester, if we switch more from cotton to organic cotton, the opportunity to do that on scale will have a huge impact. And if we can do that better, then it's going to have a big impact on emissions. The other piece is about scaling, is about accelerating the development of next generation materials. So this is my piece about, there's already a lot of good recycled polyester work. There's a lot of good work on organic cotton. Do that bigger and better. That's the big piece. The innovation piece, do it faster, but don't lose sight of one or the other. I look at things like the leather conversation. We're in deep discussion with the leather industry, and there are new alternatives to leather, but getting the whole of the leather industry to do what it does better on the core product will have an enormous impact on the environmental impact. The new types of innovation are not going to get us there quickly enough, but they will be a key part of it if we accelerate it. So those are my kind of 3 points: collaboration is new leadership. Don't reinvent the wheel. Do the boring better and the exciting faster.
Great, thank you very much, Andrew. And yeah, it seems there's something engaging here around action, engagement, collaboration. There, that there is a lot of stuff out there. Use that, but also there is an innovation space emerging. How do we do that in a way that is more sustainable, and we get the positive elements of innovation moving quicker? So we've only got time for one specific question right now, but I know there are other questions that we'll pick up in the last section of this. So I see Daryl's had his hand up for a long time, and can you enable yourself, Daryl? Yeah.
Hi, Martin. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good day to everybody. I'll be as quick as possible. 2 points. Post my retirement, I have been involved in coaching for almost 20 years, working with kids from as young as 5 to 12. That was sort of the age group. And I sadly came to a realization that cricket's pretty much a boring game. So the one side is the format, but partly to the format is how do we make it more affordable? How do we make it fun, exciting, and keep kids playing the game? The other part to it is, and I think it would accelerate, or not the word accelerate, but certainly add to what's been said today, is the biggest barrier of entry is cost into cricket. The cost of equipment is simply unacceptable. And what sparked my interest when we first started chatting, Martin, was the idea of bamboo bats, where I'd like to see till the age of 12, kids don't need to play hardball cricket. Technically, it would actually enhance their game. Boys and girls can play together. Central to it all is the ball. You find a good relationship between bat and ball. Willow, leather has always been the preferred choice. But cricket equipment, the willow bat has been used for 100 years. We haven't seen a change. Unlike other sports, artificial products have been introduced. So I believe a kid, all he should arrive to play cricket is a protector. And there's a standard bat made from something, getting the ball right, which is indoor cricket, action cricket. They don't wear protective equipment. So it takes helmets, takes pads completely out of it, and with a different format. And we invited, as you know, a manufacturer. He didn't appear on the apparel side today. I asked him why, and he said, well, it's all about the sweat management and the breathability of the clothing. I wear bamboo clothing, t-shirts, best piece of clothing I've ever worn. It's so comfortable, and I certainly don't experience those issues. So my hope is that in time, that we will see the willows replaced. You get a lot of resistance. It's a cottage industry really controlled by a couple of families, that we will see an artificial bat be introduced simply to make the game more popular. In closing, if you take Africa, I live in South Africa, the cost of a cricket bat for an 8-year-old could be a parent's salary. Who's going to encourage their child when you've got to spend a salary just on a cricket bat? And then you got all the bag, you got the gloves and whatever. So I'm very pro, very supportive, and I think we'll get there one day, but they're going to need to be forced to change. And with all of these other compounding factors on the game and clothing and that sort of thing, to see a game which is much more popular, boys and girls can play together, and it's at a minimal cost of maybe £2-3. The artificial bats or the alternatives would last forever. These guys dry these willow bats to get them out there. Within 2 years, you'll be lucky if it's not cracked or broken. So you have my full support. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, and for those who are not from cricket, Daryl used to play the highest level for South Africa, and against a lot of the best players in at the time. So, and I think Daryl brings up that important point of the kids, the coaching, and that's a huge area that globally speaking, and again that issue of the cost, and maybe performance is needed at the level of the first levels of kids, but there's something there about doing things differently. Could we use sustainability to deal with some of those innovation issues as a driver to push the new thinking there? So I think please keep your questions going and your thinking going, and in the chat, and we'll pick that up. So what we're now going to do is to move into a series of breakout rooms. There's going to be hosted by, our colleagues, and what the goal of these breakout rooms really is to discuss, what you've heard today, to then consider, some key questions. And those key questions are: what are the key environmental, social, and economic issues related to cricket gears? We've discussed what are some of those key issues. What are the biggest challenges to innovation? We've heard about that sort of need for innovation. We've also heard more broadly about engagement, collaborative innovation, doing stuff now, utilizing existing knowledge, skills, tools. And then what innovation opportunities might be driven by sustainability, in the sector, and that might be environmental or social. I haven't quite thought what the social innovation here is, but it might be something that joins up around the second life use of clothing and equipment in communities, and extending the life of materials, getting better recycling systems, reuse systems in. There's probably already examples of sharing of equipment that goes on in leagues around the world, so that people are extending the life of equipment through reuse. So anyway, we'll for time, I think we'll probably leave this now to about a half an hour's discussion. We will now move into the sessions that are going to be chaired by Yashi from Kahani, Mark Ivor from World Sporting Goods Federation Industry, Russ from Basis, Chris from Basis, and Niall McPhee, who's Associate Director at Sports Lab. So we'll set this up for about a half an hour or so, and if we'll then come back around 12:50 and have a short break to 12:20, and then we'll have a short report back from the speakers, and then we'll hopefully pick up a little bit of discussion at the end.
Yep, I'm right here.
Okay, so if you want to just sort of kick off with a few key issues that emerged from your group, that would be great.
Absolutely. I had Monica, I had Nicola, Andrew Martin, and Dilip. It was a small group. But again, just like you said, we didn't have enough time to discuss, and we could have gone much longer, multiple hours, to continue discussion. But our focus of the group was apparel, sports apparel, and then, the issues that we have in this industry, and how the sports industry kind of, overlaps with the issues that fashion industry already has, and how can we use sports, especially cricket, as a medium to solve some of the issues that are there in the industry. So some of the discussion points included, one of the biggest one was the waste, which is generated because the nature of the sport is seasonal, and that creates a lot of waste. When we were talking about, the biggest challenges is, of course, the materials, because we have polyester as one of the base materials for most common material, I should rather say. And then we have multiple environmental issues related with it as well, the supply chain, the colors again, and then, how can we have policies and the purchasing practices in place to reduce those? And then the innovation would be like, how do we solve the issues of waste in this industry by weaving in the circular economy practices, by educating the consumer, because what we were talking is educating the consumer could be that key to kind of reduce the biggest problem that we have in this industry of waste, and which would automatically kind of, help us in reducing the carbon emissions, help us in reducing multiple other environmental as well as multiple other social issues. So those were some of the main points that we discussed.
Brilliant, excellent. I'm sure there will be some symmetry in other groups around. So over now to Mark Ivor.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. So we covered quite a few topics in our breakout. We first talked about child labor, and we recognized that you can't just say that there's an issue with child labor. It depends on the products produced, on the sector. So there's certain products which kids can produce, others they can't produce, for example, the cricket bats. But it's also a differentiation which is necessary to be made, where the manufacturers are enrolled in auditing programs and are aware of the issue. So you can't say across the apparel industry there's child labor, for example, in India, because the manufacturers who are audited, the manufacturers who take the responsibility. So you have to differentiate there. Then we talked about audit fatigue and the opportunities to overcome that. We talked about an example where the bike industry is jointly auditing suppliers. But we also say if you start off auditing, there's a huge menu of things you can audit, and you might need to focus first on some areas, like, for example, a sort of risk assessment, and that you choose wisely what you want to focus on. Then we also learned that, also speaking about sustainability and environment, there are certain companies who are taking this issue already seriously. So like Anurag explained, their factory is using solar panels for the energy. They have electric scooters for their employees, etc. So they're far ahead developed when it comes to sustainability. And there are many factories who are producing for cricket brands, like the one of Anurag, who is already audited by those brands, like New Balance, Puma, Adidas, etc. So it's not starting from scratch. And it's not only about the product as such, but also the process that we have to look on. So not only how is the cricket bat produced, but also how is the transportation for employees organized, with, for example, with e-scooters. And then we discussed about going back to the product, about the importance of the cricket sport, and to be tailor-made to women's needs as it is growing. So we have a growing number of women playing cricket, but the products nowadays are not tailor-made for women. So there's a need for development there to make sure that demand of that growing consumer group is met as well. And when it comes to establishing your supply chain, it's also important that you make a search and you filter the supplies you want to have, so you can refer to certain standards like Blue Sign, for example. You can see where your supplies are located, what kind of issues you have in those regions, and to see if they have been audited, etc., to make sure that you do business with a company who is already meeting certain standards requirements. That's it from my side. Thank you, Martin.
Excellent. And Russ, are you there, Russ?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Yeah, we kind of had what I enjoyed, a really good conversation with three people from very diverse sporting backgrounds and the way they're engaging with the sports market. So maybe we didn't stick to the three questions as prescribed, but for me, it was absolutely fascinating. So Jeremy is producing cricket bats, Willow Production. So we've talked quite a bit about cricket bats today. Point that really just not through the sports market per se, the cricket market per se, but just through general regulation. You know, they plant more trees than they actually cut. So there's probably a net positive gain from an environmental sort of carbon perspective. So the prospect, I guess, of a bamboo bat coming in, you know, there's a lot of questions that still need to be asked. If the willow production is quite sustainable anyway, and it's recognised as top quality, sometimes, you know, we can innovate for the sake of innovation, and that goes across the board for other materials as well. Eleanor then comes from horse racing, and we actually had a really fascinating discussion for me, going away from my real background and interest in environmental impacts, but we turned much more to social aspects for both Eleanor and James. And Eleanor's producing or the Scottish Racing Association is producing a clothing range for women. And look, us men, we tend to be sort of ignorant and just expect, we've developed clothing and everybody can wear the same thing, but it just doesn't fit. Women are a different shape, just in case any blokes out there hadn't realized. So, and for me, a couple of numbers that shocked me. The grassroots sort of horse racing industry, 86% women coming in at grassroots, and their aspiration at that level is to become top level jockeys. Partway through that training process, that aspiration disappears. And in fact, only 10% of top jockeys are women. So there's something that is happening. Now, there could be all sorts of things, but the one aspect we talked about was the clothing, and it just doesn't fit. And there are other issues around it, around sizing. It's just uncomfortable. So women are actually buying things and then adapting them. Sexualization of young women coming into this, they're wearing tight clothing to do this. So there's body imagery aspects. These are all social impacts. So really quite a lot of issues that need to be addressed to actually level this up and allow people to participate in sports. So the whole clothing and apparel industry needs to be looked at from that perspective. And then James was from Click Again Sport, which is looking to reuse and offer sports equipment. James, forgive me, I can't remember, you sort of gave some percentages or some numbers around the amount of sports gear in general that's used. I think one I noted was the average garage in North America has about $1,000 worth of sports equipment that is no longer being used and could probably be productively used by somebody else. So just in terms of access, I mean, Daryl previously made the point that in South Africa, a cricket bat could be a month's salary for a parent, for example. So there are these other social aspects that we really need to be looking at as well, far beyond what I normally look at in terms of the environmental aspects. So it's quite a wide-ranging conversation, but some things that I hadn't previously thought about did come up, and genuinely very, very interesting conversation.
Great, excellent. And it's multifaceted, and I don't think probably any of the group stuck to the questions. So it's a learning for the next session to keep the questions open. But it's over to Chris for feedback.
Thank you, Martin. So we kind of looked at innovation, I suppose, through the lens of the questions that were being asked around social, economic, and environmental impact. And so we had a manufacturer there, and then people from the heritage crafts side of things. And it was interesting talking about innovation and framing that within the sort of heritage craft and preserving skills and all the social benefits that go along with that. Mary did raise the issue around willow and the fact that it in the UK it actually is a very sustainable product and to use, because as Russ just articulated about the fact that they plant more than they cut down. So you then got your raw material source, but then the problem comes in terms of the actual manufacture of it and having the skills to do it and being able to do it at a sort of cost that is something that the market wants. But the whole conversation around innovation and then the benefits it can bring. So whilst globalization has in some ways driven innovation, there are a number of obviously social impacts that we're now kind of understanding, and certainly preserving crafts and skills and local manufacture is important for the wider society of that particular country. And if you lose all that, a lot of those benefits and the ancillary benefits disappear with it. We're talking about apprenticeships as being one thing, and Sean was saying, he comes from a family where it's been sort of passed down from generation the generations, and his worry would be that beyond him, what happens, and that's obviously going to be magnified in across a whole number of different kinds of crafts, and that obviously has knock-on effects for providing employment, providing all the kinds of social benefits that we want from that. We also talked a little bit about the provenance of the equipment, and the fact that it might be assembled in whichever country it is, and then purported to be produced and made there, and that's really the whole sort of greenwashing problem that there is. So, in terms of having a better system of recording where stuff is made, how it's made, and which kind of fits in a bit with what Mark and Guido was saying, some kind of measurable way of understanding where products are made, and then that way you can start to measure their carbon footprint, and actually develop a kind of a scale so that you can weigh up whether locally made products at possibly made in factories that are emitting far more emissions than possibly in India or Pakistan. You've got to look at the thing holistically. So it was a wide ranging, and like I said, it was more of a conversation, but a lot of interesting, I thought a lot of interesting elements of what we were discussing earlier came out in the discussions. So I think that's it from us, unless any of the other ones from the group want to add something.
I mean, it does beg the question, given that a significant number of bats are made in India, whether there are bat making skills schools or all the skills within the families and the factories, and given the number of people involved, and the skills issue, particularly also with the balls as well, I guess, that's another now known unknown, but maybe we could try and find out some more.
Exactly. Well, Mary made the point. I mean, she said,
okay,
basically apprenticeships are not fit for purpose here in the UK, and it sounds like there might be an opportunity in Ireland for her to set up a branch over there, but that genuinely is, because they are niche occupations, but contained within a wider framework, they are really important to the kind of wider, as I said, wider social benefits. Sure.
Yeah.
great. Sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to add there that it's not just about it's obviously about also handing down the skills, and that's fine, but the machinery and the technology that's available now will be the craft of the future as well, and that's what future generations will see. So it's important not to just box ourselves, I think, into what we've always done as well, and I think that's something that maybe could be talked about more as well from a Western society perspective, and that's something that we need to consider.
Great. So last but no means least, is Niall still here? Yeah.
I'm still here, guys.
Yeah.
I think it was a really good discussion I had with Adam, Darshil, and Colin. It was quite interesting because we obviously focused very much on the products, and what I wanted to focus on really is the challenges to innovation and then the innovation opportunities. So we tried to run through it quickly, but first of all, the people in cricket, there's a heritage that creates some problems, but also creates a lot of opportunities. So that's the first thing to state, and with that, there's got to be a balanced approach to the equipment and the impact it has on the bigger scale. So, in terms of facilities and structures, but bearing that in mind, looking at gear and the importance of having a datum on technology. If we can take the willow bat, one of the chaps pointed out very rightly so that they're not reproducible very easily. So one bat to another doesn't, the likes of it's a very difficult control process to have where it's exactly the same. So to try and set a datum for what's acceptable in performance and categories very difficult, and that in turn would lead into creating tolerances for laws in the game. So an enhancement of the laws of the game would allow products to find the criteria they need to meet, and I guess that then leads into the knock-on effect for the companies and the cost. A lot of the companies that operate in cricket supply of equipment are small. They're not huge companies like Adidas and Nike that we hear about from the Sporting Goods Pledge. And I think that's really important to understand, is that it has a knock-on effect to these companies. There's a lot of volunteers, a lot of people that have been working in these companies for a long time. But in that regard, as Sean just pointed out, we need to embrace new technologies. We need to embrace younger people in the game. That's been pointed out in the presentations already, and that will then lead to more innovation ideas and opportunities. There's currently more funding and sustainability options available up and down the breadth of the country, and really importantly, and we've heard it quite a few times in previous webinars, the players have been involved in the product development in an objective way. The players are given feedback, and that's really important to make sure the innovation goes in the right direction. And finally, very quickly on 100/2022, we didn't get to cover this, but I wanted to add the point that I think there's an opportunity for governance and for the message to be sent. So being realistic, the reactivity of cricket and sports is not, it's got a short timeline. So maybe in terms of the governance of in terms of looking at the products that are used, in terms of, for example, taking the Sporting Goods Pledge for that and trying to apply it in an exemplary process would be fantastic. And that's us closed. So.
Brilliant, excellent. There's a lot of, wide-ranging information, from supply chain to skills to innovation, this engagement. So perhaps I'm just sort of thinking we've got sort of about another 20 minutes to go. So, I think probably if there was any direct questions in the chat, or people have any direct comments they want to make, or questions to other speakers or other people they spoke to, perhaps just put your hand up, and we could just say your name, and then you can speak. So if we could just, does anybody want to make any further comments, or well, maybe I'll throw one out then. So, or if there was any questions, direct questions that we picked up in the chat, or maybe we could just have a quick look while I'm saying this. So given we've got quite a good cross-section of people from the sector, people who know about the sector, people know about other sectors, do we think there would be a benefit in some sort of code of conduct, or whatever the right words are, some sort of set of principles, a code of conduct around these issues that the sector might engage with? Because we've already heard that there is some good practice going on, through the supply chain. There are questions being asked, serious questions being asked, serious responses happening, by suppliers. But by its very nature, it's a sort of small sample. But certainly one thing that's coming up to me was there's a need for in cricket to develop something that's a sort of a directory of good practice, because there's obviously good practice going on, but it's quite difficult to find that because it's not really been something that's been looked at in the past. Mark, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. I think so. It's a good idea what you just outlined with a standard. What I just want to stress is the importance in considering existing standards rather than establishing a new one. Otherwise, we will run into this audit fatigue duplication issue that we discussed in our breakout group. So looking into what is existing, talking to people like Anurag and saying, hey, you're getting audited anyway, which of the audits are fully covering your cricket production, and what is the basis of such audits, what's the standard which is the basis for such exercises, and then looking at those existing initiatives and standards and picking one of those rather than establishing a new one, because establishing a new one would mean it will be translated into an audit scope, a particular one, which means it is an additional scope, an additional audit format at the end of the day, and is adding an additional layer to those manufacturers who are already being audited. So looking at what is existing would be, I think, so a decent solution forward, as you say, to agree on a common standard.
And I
Thank
mean,
you. That's just a comment.
Yeah. Just a very quick follow-up on that. And I mean, the point you mentioned, I think, for the bicycle sector, where they're sharing the costs, or there was an example where a number of manufacturers get together, and I know about there's similar initiatives from the electronic sector where there's some sort of unified codes where
the EICC or something like that.
Where the manufacturer, because the example was given by Anurag was, with his customer, he has to produce an entirely separate piece of auditing for each customer, which is obviously, for example, 3 sets of audits, 3 sets of costs, 3 sets of time and complexity. If he could have one system, where all the manufacturers bought into it, that there could be a sort of unified audit, done that was almost relevant for all the manufacturers. Of course, from a supply side, small and medium supplier, that would be really, I'm sure that would be well received. Sorry, I see other hands up. I think
Martin, sorry, can I just quickly jump in?
Yeah.
So Jan and Adam are both from cricket gear suppliers and manufacturers. And if they don't mind sort of jumping in the conversation, I'd be interested to know what your, so Jan's from New Balance and from Gray Nichols. It'd just be interesting from your perspective, if there were those kinds of I'm not going to call them regulations, but recommendations. How would you feel that they would impact on you? Positive, negative? I'm just interested.
Positively, definitely. From our perspective, because there's not the regulation in place, it's hard for us to have anything as a benchmark. But certainly, we would look at any regulation, new regulation, or any interesting innovations. Basically, we're open. We are very open at New Balance.
Thanks, Jan. Thanks. Appreciate you commenting. Adam, you.
Yeah, I think probably Mark hit the nail on the head earlier that there are standards in place already. And it doesn't necessarily need to be cricket specific. Cricket is such a small game, such a small industry in the big picture of things that, to be really focused on just cricket. And many of our suppliers, we've got our own factory in India, don't just make cricket products for us, they make a range of products. So the processes are in place, the standards that the factories have to meet are kind of there anyway. So I think there's a danger of sort of everyone jumping in and saying it's all about cricket when actually it's not. It's all about sport in general. Or
no, absolutely. And I made that point in our group. This is the start, and I was looking at cricket in particular because of the number of, as Martin highlighted, 40 plus materials that get used in the production of equipment.
And again, that's an issue that I think we've recognised. If we've been only at this for 3 to 6 months, and already we've learned a whole lot of stuff. Even though we thought we actually knew quite a lot, but we actually knew it. It's still a whole load more we done. But certainly getting more understanding of the supply chain issues. I mean, some of the issues you're saying that, of course, some of those manufacturers may be producing all sorts of products, and cricket may be just sort of one part of the factory, particularly when you get to maybe a variety of the products. But I see Yashi's hand up. Yeah.
Thank you, Martin. No, I just wanted to comment on what we're discussing and just kind of piggybacking on what Mark was saying and what Andrew Martin was saying earlier, that We already have so many tools in place in different industries using that. So like taking the example of the apparel industry, SSC from, what Andrew was representing, they have a wonderful tool called Hig Index. So like there could be many other tools in many of these different industries that we see the overlap with the cricket industry in a cricket sector. Maybe we need to kind of map it all together instead of reinventing the wheel. We put it all together on a bigger scope and see how can we put it all together and go from there. Because collaboration will be the only way to move forward. The issues that we are discussing here cannot be solved by one industry, by one organization, or one government. It has to be a collaborative effort, and we have to make sure that the brands, the governance, the government bodies, and the consumers, we have to balance the approach for all the three. And we all, like all three pillars, have to act in tandem to actually shift the needle and make the change.
Thanks.
Indeed.
Kathy had her hand up, Martin.
So,
Kathy had her hand up.
okay, sorry, I didn't appear on my screen. Sorry, go ahead. Kathy?
Sorry, I didn't have my hand up, but
Oh.
I will step in. I agree with those points, and I mean, it is about the not reinventing the wheel. I think what would be handy for everybody is to actually be better aware of those existing tools and those existing standards and make sure they're making best use of those ones, because a lot of time, money, effort has been put into creating great standards. They're just not being used by the right people at the right time. And I think that's what we need is like, so I fully agree with Ashley's point about the mapping out and helping everybody get on board using existing global standards.
And I think it's the mapping and using those existing tools is part of it, also to define what is missing. Because there are certainly with the Hig Index, as far as I know, if Andrew's still on the call, that's been primarily environmentally focused. So I think we've seen this whole issue. There's now within the ISO process, there's work starting on a social LCA. With one of the European projects we're involved in, we're looking at sort of product social impacts, not just environmental impacts. And so I think that social dimension is emerging, that perhaps there are less tools. But I think a mapping exercise would be useful to find what's missing and mapping that against the stakeholders. Because stakeholders will have different needs and different key performance indicators. So sounds like we've got to raise some money, Chris, to employ to get some consultancy work going or something.
It does. Well, that's one of our next projects.
But did Mark, was your hand still up, or was that a legacy hand, as I call them?
Oh, I apologize. I didn't took it down after the last
No, I think Sean had his hand up.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen. Yep. Is that a current hand, Sean?
Yeah, sorry. I just would, I suppose from a manufacturing perspective and around all of this as well, I would just say that maybe, and this isn't just for cricket, this could be any sport, companies who are looking to innovate and develop sustainably and are considering the environment with the products they're creating and are showing that needs to be highlighted better to the end user somehow, against the ones that are doing the bad practices in the future. That's one of my biggest bugbears, is that you can put a lot of effort into being sustainable and being environmentally aware, and the customer does not understand and is not willing to. In some cases, they can cost more to be more sustainably aware, and they're not maybe educated or willing to part with the money to protect our future. And so that's something that I think, again, everybody, we need to work on to deliver that message to the customer, that yeah, you can get this product over here, but that's not really good for the environment. But you can get this same product with the same performance values, and it is actually going to be good for the environment. How we get there, I'm not sure, but it's something worth considering, you know.
Well, maybe that goes back to, and I see Nicola's got a comment, but a quick one while it's in my head, is this idea if we could develop maybe a showcase 2022 sustainable 100, which showcase the idea, showcase the issues. There was wider spin-off market education issues. Maybe there was use of some sort of some prototypes, you know, some sort of showcase demonstration that had a broader goal. Might be an interesting idea. And we've had some interest, at least on the surface.
Sorry, Martin, just to explain. So we talk about the 100 tournament, which is the ECB's new tournament, effectively to reach a different audience. Okay, and that's going to be, you know, slightly different form of the game, etc., and have a lot of razzmatazz attached to it. So our idea was that, you know, is there an opportunity in 2022 to run a tournament that's completely sustainable from, you know, every element of it, which would include obviously the equipment and sportswear side of it.
So I see that Nicola had a
that was I was going to go for.
Oh, thank you. No, I just wanted to just pick up on a bit from the comments that were just now. So first of all, from what Kathy was saying, so from a international federation sort of point of view, and we're sort of at the start of our journey in the tennis world in terms of considering sustainability, and that we realize that our role is to make sure that what we do kind of put into our policy is meaningful in terms of sustainability. But as Kathy said in the comment in the chat, we don't have time to reinvent the wheel there, but also that if there are these indexes or other systems out there which are, you know, obviously they're being created and they're being tested through and they are effective, then absolutely, I think that's a great idea to adopt them. And also hopefully that doesn't cause confusion for the rest of the industry. If they're already being used and there's that understanding, we want something that can be rolled out, which is not only effective, but is easy to follow, I guess, for the rest of the industry, whoever you might be working with. And then also just on one point that Sean had made, about sorry, it's completely gone off my head now. I think
education, customer education. People not wanting to buy the greener alternative.
Oh, yes,
challenges
that's right.
commercial
Yes,
products.
It was a bit about distinguishing. So we're obviously hoping that once we have something in place, it is a means to allow the companies who are actually doing meaningful work in being more sustainable, is allowing them to distinguish themselves from other companies. So only meaning in that in doing that, we can hopefully encourage that movement within the industry for people to be thinking about sustainability, to be investing in it. And we want to encourage the innovations in that area. So yeah, just following it on.
If I could just make a plug for Basis here. What Nicola's saying about the sharing of information, that is very much what we're about, and it's why we, you know, put together these kinds of forums so that we can all share information as members, and you know, it's vital to us that happens. You know, we're trying to make sure best practice and innovation is part of that. I just quickly, Monica, if you don't mind, I know you're on the research and development side, is that right, at Grey Nichols? So, yeah, you're muted at the moment. No, okay. Okay, I was just going to ask you, Monica, on the research and development side of Grey Nichols, about what kind of, in terms of innovation, what's important to you guys?
Well, what we try to concentrate at the moment, I know this, because we mainly produce from polyester. So what we try to concentrate is not on recycled material that much, like on the full cycle of the product. So what is actually going to happen with the products afterwards. So we're looking into it's called closed loop. So
Right. Yep.
so we looking on this type of production where we're not going to reuse our polyester, but we're going break to the basic sources and to reproduce polyester and produce new products from that. So we're kind of in a good position because we have our factory in Pakistan, which is able to knit the fabric. So the cycle is of products to be made to the yarn, and that's recycled yarn is used for the fabric again, and it's just going make another product.
Sorry, just to interject there. Are you looking at a de and repolymerization process where you break it down and then you repolymerize? Because this is what's happening with the Econile that's from the fishing net. That's from nylon. That they'll take the nylon, then they'll de and repolymerize and produce a second life. So you're just keeping a closed loop.
Yes, but no, not like nylon. And nylon it can't be recycled, not fully.
Yeah, yes, it can be. Have a look at the Econile process. They have a de and repolymerization process that produces a second life fiber that's in carpets, in clothing, and so it can, at least for that. That's the only one I know. I don't know about other ones, but I know they do have that process in place for some time now. It costs them a lot of money, 15 to 20 million euros in the factory, but certainly they've proven you can do it with nylon.
Okay, well, it's lots of different processes. Our fabrics, they're mainly produced from 100% polyester. So that's what we mainly concentrate on. Well, we can agree or disagree. Some people will say the cotton is great product, but you can't finish or treat cotton the same way like you do with polyester. So as we was talking earlier about the heating, polyester is much more absorb and is much better for the sport wear and performance. So that's the only reason why mainly sport industry is producing from polyester. And I don't think that's going to change. Also, just based on the climate change, the cotton today is not that strong like used to be. And cotton plantations, they are affected. And it's much less organic farms, even if it's higher demand for organic cotton, because it's just harder to produce organic cotton today. So yeah, we're just looking we're just looking on the closed loop. So where we produce for polyester, we can reproduce again. We also was talking earlier in the room about recycle and reuse the product from the polyester. So let's just base on the t-shirt. If we produce polyester t-shirt and we send elsewhere to reuse, remake again bags or cushions, you name it, that's still waste. Because you don't know how many of those you go and sell. What's going to happen with this product? It's still a problem. So the closed loop today, I believe, is the best solution. Yes, there are lots of new polyester fabrics currently developed, which can be disposable. That's great. But this is a very new innovation and haven't been in the market long enough to be tested. Yes, we keep open mind for those, but I don't think that's going to happen for 2022. Also, cricket is very specific sport and require very bright colors. So if you back on the very bottom supply chain to achieve such a bright colors, unfortunately, you have to use the chemicals. Cotton doesn't absorb that bright colors. It's the same with bamboo. So there's lots of cricket regulations, requirements, issues.
Thanks, Monica.
There was,
Really
I think there was a point there from Niall, and just one very quick point, just in response to Monica's point, is I guess there are other opportunities that you see in other sectors where clothing is moved into broken down and used maybe for insulation and things. Obviously, that's outside your system, and that this idea of the closed and the open loop. But that's another thing one's seen in other sectors. Niall, yeah.
Yeah, just a very quick one, Martin. It refers back to a point that Mark made, and it's a really, really good one. It's about the auditing. To get the pledge done and then continue the audit is really important. The reason for that is we work with a lot of the licensees in the FIFA program, from balls to goaling technology to surfaces, and a lot of them will move factories from China to Vietnam based on local regulations and rules. So the auditing part of that process is really, really key and important. It's just to bring a bit of emphasis to that.
Did we have any last comments or points from this section? And then, I guess Chris and I'll just close it off if there isn't any other.
Martin,
yeah,
if I may.
Sorry. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Actually, just quickly, I was just going to say, I know James, obviously around the recycling, repurposing, upcycling side of things, we're unfortunately not going to have enough time to do that. But I think that would be a really interesting area of discussion. Listening to what Monica was saying.
And I think we can again think about the innovation platform idea. That's something that we can certainly facilitate a conversation around with our various experiences, bringing in also experiences for other areas in a sort of, if need be, a sort of Chatham House type of system. But sorry, across to Yashi. Yeah.
Now, I just wanted to make a quick point about innovation. It is extremely important for us to start thinking out of the box, think about solving the problems in innovative ways, but it is extremely important to consider that when we are innovating or looking at those innovative materials, methods, processes, whatever it is, that we have a holistic approach to it. To solve that one problem, we are not creating another problem. And I think that needs to be at the core of it. And we just make sure that we are weaving in, no matter whatever the solution is, the prosperity of our planet, the prosperity of our communities. And along with these two ties the prosperity of the business, whichever is creating that, innovating it, whatever they're doing. But those are some of the basics that we need to make sure that we do not create another problem to solve one problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Yashi.
So maybe I'll just sum up from my side and leave it pass across to you, Chris. So for me, thank you everybody for participating in this. This was a challenge that Chris and I took on to bring together a range of stakeholders to address this issue. We believe it's the first time that such a meeting has been held with actual people, engaged in the sector. So there's still a lot more work to do. We've uncovered a lot of things that we need to look at into the future. I've heard a variety of issues about, looking at the systems issue. We don't want unintended consequences. We've got issues there to do with sort of codes using existing, codes but also identifying where the gaps are, because there are gaps, and there's in this sector, most of the focus has been on the venues and not on the products. So I think there's, for me, something that's come out around good practice, who's doing stuff, great to have a little series of little caselets or examples of what people do, because that's good news. And I've heard nothing to say, maybe we should explore these issues further. So thank you all very much. Excellent contributions, and I think we'll be continuing the collaboration with BASIS, between UCA and BASIS, and coming up with some things into the future, including this idea of an innovation workshop in September or October, and you will hear more for us. But I'll pass across to Chris.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, just to echo that, Yes, thank you to everybody who's participated, and I mean that genuinely, from the manufacturers and from the Heritage Craft Association right through to everybody else that was contributing, and to the ECB, who obviously one of the key players in the world of cricket, so obviously have an effect. And to Jeremy, so just to answer your question, Jeremy, yes, there will be a recording, and we'll make something available for people to look at. In terms of basis, like I said, and what our purpose is, it is working with people like the UCA to put on these kinds of events where we can really draw together lots of expertise from different parts of the industry. And going forward, there are a couple of things. We are looking to write a paper around this, so we will in time develop that. The next step will be, as Martin referred to, an innovation look at a more deeper dive into the innovation side of things. But what I do hope is that you have made new contacts, and we can share those contacts with you. So if you, obviously with the permission of the contactee, so if you do want to meet up with anyone further, just let us know, and we'll pass on your details, because it sounds like you all have quite a bit to talk about amongst each other. Philip, just briefly, if you want to close out from the UCA side of things.
I think the same from me. Delighted that we could be part of this, and very much looking forward to being part of the continuation of this. So thank you very much to all the organisers and all the participants. It's been a really, really interesting morning. So thank you.
Thanks, Philip. And thank you to the chairs of the breakout groups. Appreciated the input there, Neil and Mark. And Russ, of course. Right, we'll see you all.
Everybody.
We'll see you all soon. As I say, get in contact if you want
guys.
Details of
Yeah,
anyone.
thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye. Bye.